Hello, name's Split Suns. Thanks for checking out my channel. Although if you're here, you probably already know me through other means, like, my SoundCloud or whatever. So this is going to be the first video, what will hopefully be a series, where I explain basically the process behind making some of my songs. Just like various ones that I have on my SoundCloud or my Bandcamp that I've made for different projects. Probably not any of my solo work, because that's usually just like small one-off things. Most of my big work is for music teams, for various webcomics. Or not really for the webcomics themselves, like, fan music teams. So, for this first video that I'm going to talk about a song I made for the Paranatural Fanmusic Team called Stoker of Nightmares. And if you haven't read Paranatural, I definitely recommend it. It's a great webcomic about basically these kids in middle school who develop supernatural powers and learn to fight off evil spirits and get caught up in like crazy situations involving different corporations that are trying to deal with these ghosts too. A lot of like interpersonal drama, a lot of funny moments, some scary moments too. I definitely recommend it, but when I found out that a fan project was being made for the comic to make basically a soundtrack for it, I thought to myself, I definitely want to be involved in this, and I knew exactly from the start what kind of a song I was going to do. And what I ended up doing was I made a song centered around one of the villains in the comic, whose name is Forge. It's basically this evil spirit kind of character who shows up around like the halfway point. I think chapter 4. There are like 5 chapters, but the 5th chapter is incredibly long, much longer than the rest of the comic. So Forge is this sort of giant walking sentient suit of armor with this head that looks like the helmet of a knight, but with like its own set of eyes and a nose and a mouth that has like rows of serrated teeth. He carries around this giant hammer that he uses to fashion objects, because he's like a forge. There's a furnace inside of him. He can breathe fire. This very imposing, menacing figure who basically plays the role of the villain in this 4th chapter. And he's always a character that really interested me for a lot of reasons. I liked his design. I liked the way he carried himself in the comic. I thought he was a really imposing, menacing, like really mysterious character. Because for a lot of the time that you see him, he doesn't speak English. He speaks this other language that you can decipher, like it does mean things in English. And when I saw that, I thought, that's really cool. It's a cool idea. Other characters do it too, but he's like the one that is really prominently doing it in the comic when he's around. So I thought to myself, I'm going to make a song for this character. And the comic is mostly like, a silly comic. It doesn't take itself incredibly seriously, has a lot of comedic moments, but it also, when it has to, it takes itself very seriously and has really interesting, tense, dramatic moments. And I figured most of the people involved in the project for the fan music team would be making more lighthearted songs about some of the main characters and stuff. And I thought, I'm going to make a song about Forge. I'm going to make it a serious, a tense song, dramatic, to fit his character. And there was one scene that I had in mind that I really focused on when Nick would come up with the ideas for the song. And it's his introductory scene at the start of chapter 4, where you have this shot of an empty forest at night during a thunderstorm. And the only things you can see are these giant footprints being made in the ground with no source to them, and this really loud scraping. And then you get a crash of thunder. Lightning lights up the sky, and you see, set against the lightning, the silhouette of this giant figure carrying a hammer that's embedded in the ground. It's like scraping along the ground. And that scene where like you have no idea who this guy is, what he's capable of, but you realize that he's big, he means business, he's a tough adversary. And I thought to myself, that's the kind of atmosphere I wanted to portray in this song. But how do I do that? So, how do I do that? Well, Forge is a villain. He has like, it's one of the more serious characters. And, because like we're dealing with ghosts, spooky, mysterious, like creepy stuff like that, creepy subject matter, I thought to myself, I want to do like, more of like a creepy song. A little frightening, a little tense, that makes you a little anxious. And one of the things that I immediately thought of when I went down that line of thinking was, oh, like, 80s horror movie soundtracks, like John Carpenter, Halloween, The Thing, those kinds of things. And especially Disaster Piece, who made the soundtrack for the horror movie It Follows, came out 2014, 2015, I don't remember exactly when. And that was very inspired by John Carpenter's work, all those kinds of artists in the time period, where it's, very distinctive synth work, very like melodic, but like also uses these interesting textures to create this unsettling atmosphere. And I thought to myself, I want to make a song like that, because in Disaster Piece's work for the movie, he has, like, not straightforward's not the word, but like, melodic, structured songs, like the title theme for the movie was definitely a song that I was inspired by, but also these songs that play during frightening moments where it's just like atonal, disgusting messes of sound and texture that play at your fears in that scene. And I wanted to start the song with one of those kind of things. And I listened through like all the songs in the album, and I picked a few of the sounds like that it's with like those creepier songs that I wanted to pay homage to in my song. And then the main bulk of the song, aside from the intro, is more inspired by some of the melodic stuff like the title theme, and also some other kinds of artists that were, inspired by 80s trappings in like synth-based genres like synthwave, mega jive particularly. Some of their more horror synth-oriented work I was definitely inspired by as well, because those horror movie soundtracks didn't really have much in the way of like drums, things like that, whereas synthwave is a lot more drum based, or at least a lot of Mega Drive's work is, and I wanted the drums to have a really big presence in this track, because to me that would also really help to indicate this like slow, plodding figure where it's like the drums really have this weight to them. So some of the songs that I were definitely inspired by was the first song on It Follows, Heels, where it's like it kicks in right on the opening shot of the movie, and you get this drum, like this kick drum that goes like boom, and then you have this long bass note that just plays and echoes. It goes like boom, and it does that a few times, and then this repeated synth refrain that's like really crackly, really like gritty, starts playing in addition to that, and the tension starts to build, and then the track finally reaches its peak when these almost like alarm-like synths start kicking in, and then the drum beat changes up with like all these claps in it, and like these really interesting synth textures start to develop. And that's just like in the first minute, 2 minutes of the movie that you get this kind of an atmosphere, and that the way that the tension builds and rises is definitely something that I wanted to pay attention to. Later on in the soundtrack, which song am I thinking of? There's a song called Father, which plays near the end of the movie. That's like sort of a medley of a bunch of previous songs in the album, and there are these really interesting arpeggiated runs of just like jumbles of notes clashing in on each other, and that was an idea that I really wanted to capture too. And these long drones of like synths where like you hold a chord and then you slowly, gradually move its pitch down or up to like make things a little like unsettling. It's like, out of pitch, distorted. That was something that I also definitely tried to capture. And then the title screen, not the title screen, not a video game, it's a movie. The song title, and It Follows. It starts out with this sustained bass note, and then you get like this little like plinky arpeggio that modulates between chords for a little before you are hit with a thundering kick drum, and then the main melody starts. like da na 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 na, with like this really distinctive synth line, and that was sort of how I approached the song too, in terms of like you set up this atmosphere with like the arpeggiated synths, and then you kick it all off with the main melody, which in this song is actually made up of 3 different synths, but I'll get to that later. And then as far as Mega Drive's work, I was definitely inspired by one of their songs called Maniac, which is sort of like Disaster Piece's song Title that I mentioned, but it has way more of like I said, the drums are definitely more prominent in that track. And it's like this very fast-paced, frantic drum line that makes it seem like someone's coming after you and you gotta run, or stand your ground and try and stop them. And I wanted to definitely have that kind of like a fast-paced or hard-hitting drum beat in the song. So these were all ideas that were floating around in my head before I even started working on the song. I knew I want to hit some of these beats. I want to make a song that hopefully doesn't copy what I just talked about, but more like is inspired by it. I wanted to make something that was still distinctively a song of my own. And I hope that I succeeded in that. So now that I've got my inspirations listed, let's actually dive into this song. And it's pretty big. There's a lot of different sounds in this. A lot. I'll go through all of them and explain how I edited them, why I decided to use them, all that good stuff that I'm sure you want to know. Like, what was I thinking when producing this? Like, oh, why would I do that? It's terrible. Hopefully it's not terrible. All right, so I'll split this up into parts. So this is the intro of the piece, which what I mentioned was the more, disturbing, atonal, creepy part of the song that helps set up an atmosphere of like unease, tension, that you're dealing with something that's really frightening. So I'll play that. That's weird. Those drums should have echo on them. Why do they not? It's right. The wet is literally right there. What's going on? Hold on. There we go. I wonder is that going to reset if I play the song from the beginning? This is odd. I don't quite understand it. Hold on. Is it going to do the echo? Okay, I think we should be good now. All right. So that's the intro. Like I said, kind of menacing, atmospheric. So one of the key aspects of the song that I wanted to start developing here was the intro. Like I said, I was very inspired. Not the intro, the introductory scene in the comic. Like I said, that sets up the character, dragging his hammer through a lightning storm. So one of the first things I did was set up this noise filter that was playing these different sounds in each channel, like one's pan to the left, one's pan to the right. And I what I did was made them louder over time, of course, but then I also cut the high end as the sequence went on, so it sounded like this. And then later on in the song, they go more like that instead of going right back up to the top. So I did that to sort of suggest sounds echoing in the distance, like thunder or rainfall, something like that. And I knew that was something I wanted to do. One of the big things that I did when making this song was I used a lot of noise filters that don't have like a note to them, but just play noise. And I use that almost as like a kind of percussion. instead of like, you know, like using an actual drum kit, I just made a synth and put some noise on it. So the instrument I used to do that in Logic was Analog Polysynth, which is managed by RetroSynth here. And there are two different shapes to each synth in this synth called RetroSynth, where basically changes the way it sounds. It's like more sine. You can barely hear it. Where you see that's like more of a... Actually, no, that's a song, not a sine. What am I saying? But if you set it down here, it's just noise. That sort of like squiggly shape right there. It's just noise. So I set it to that. Now that was how I made there be noise there. Otherwise, if you don't do that, what does the synth even sound like normally? Here, let me set up a new instrument here. Analog Polysynth. So yeah, that's what that instrument sounds like normally. And I have it up here too. I use it quite a bit. That's the mono lead, but I think I did use that for noise too, or did I? I don't know. We'll get to that later. Yeah, that's what it sounds like normally. So what did I add? I added reverb and bit crusher. Discounting, like, you know, other stuff in the RetroSynth. And the bit crush I used quite a bit for a lot of these sounds. It's a sort of, you know, crackly, grainy effect where instead of like getting a full reverb with a full echo, it fizzles out. Which is something that Disaster Piece used a lot in his work on Fez, soundtrack for Fez, and on soundtrack for It Follows as well. And then the actual synth, you see more of like a sine, but then here looks very different. I changed the mix on it so that it was solely at the noise. If I were to change that, you'd be able to hear more of a synth in there because there's no noise filter for the first shape, the second shape, but the first shape, that's where the noise filter is. And I got rid of any kind of a filter, so that there'd be no cutoff to it. Just sustain that noise forever. And then up here is one of the more it's like a more of a distinctive noise filter. Start from the beginning. Have it fade in. And at first, you can't really hear it much. It's very like crackling. And I slowly raise the dry on it, whereas I think the wet stays the same, so that you can hear the actual sound instead of just the reverb. And then I change the modulation right down here, where you get that blah, 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 kind of a sound. So in this part, I was really concerned with having these, these synths build, where at first they're really quiet, you don't really notice them until before you know it, suddenly they're shifting, changing, warping. And I end up using this sound a lot throughout the track as a kind of a hi-hat, because, it has a very distinctive way that it warbles. And to me, it sounds almost like a hi-hat, a really noisy hi-hat, but a hi-hat nonetheless. Although I do end up incorporating more traditional hi-hats later on. Now, those are the main noise filters out of the way for now, I think, in this intro. So now, down here, you have this bass. And this I made myself in Massive. Massive is a synth that a lot of producers use, Disaster Piece, especially. Because Hello is influenced by Disaster Piece quite a bit here. He used this to make a lot of the sounds on Fez, on It Follows, and on his work for Hyper Light Drifter. Blank Banshee, Vaporwave producer, he uses some presets in Massive as well, some of his more recent work. But I'll get into my Blank Banshee inspired stuff in another video. So for here, I took default synth and basically tweaked it to my heart's content. I wanted a sort of subdued bass sound that's like, gradually fades in, but once it's in, you can feel it. That's the setup, that kind of a drone that I was really looking for in this first part of the song. Now, where's the, I forget which one of these, it's not this one, is it? Oh, it is. So you can see I have the attack pretty long there, relatively speaking. Then kind of a long release too. I didn't really want it to just, bam, it's in. I want it to be sort of a slow burn, which is helped by the bit crush, where hear that crackle. Why is there pitch shift on here? I didn't use pitch shift, did I? Oh, yeah, it's mixed in there faintly. Forgot I even did that. Can't even really tell it's there. Oh, you tell a little bit. I have some EQ to bump up the low end, especially because, this is bass after all. There's a faint flanger on it, too. To help add some more depth to the synth instead of it just being, a straight, buzz. So that was definitely something that I've tried to do in this track. I had just gotten Massive, I think, when I was making the song, and I knew I wanted to include some Massive sounds in here as well. Even if I couldn't completely replicate some of the sounds Disaster has used, I wanted to at least, try my hand at it. I'm not great at making my own synths, but hopefully I'll get better over time at it. There's a saw and a crude oscillator on it that's pitched, I think that's pitched up. So, you have some multiple octaves here at once. And down here, I think this is just another version of that same sound, but instead of the low end magnified, it's the high end on the EQ. And that's just to add another layer to the sound. Oh, right. And for both of these, I made the pan modulate. At this point, I think I did not know what tremolo was on here. Because later on, I realized, hey, you just use tremolo to automate shifting pan. And in my early tracks, I didn't really do that much. I did it all by hand, so it's not completely accurate. But, oh well. Live and learn. My newer work, I almost never do this anymore. It's mostly all tremolo. That is used to do that. Now we're getting down here. This was a sound that I found just looking through Logic presets, soundscape synthesizer, and I knew, yes, this could definitely be in the song as one of those creepy synths. Just one note on this alchemy patch, sustained, and changing pitch with the pitch bender, I think, and I don't think pan is being changed at all. Now, what's the sound like normally? Oh, it's really, really low in volume at this point. Yeah, I have it set to a full sizzle kind of sound. The way alchemy works, this is another synth. This comes with Logic. You have a lot of these presets, and then 8 different ways you can manipulate their sound, as opposed to just, editing the different sources directly and changing the way that the synth interacts with them down here. You can just do it with these 8 presets. That's something that I try to mess around with a little bit when I use alchemy. Now here, this is definitely one of the backbone instruments in this piece. This being one of them, these being another. This drum right here, and the thing beneath it too. These all work together. to help set up that plodding, slow atmosphere that I was mentioning, especially in the Disaster Piece song Heals, where I mentioned the song starts out with this echoing, reverberating kick drum and then this slow, like, echoing bass note. I wanted to capture that here, so this is what I did. And now it's not echoing again. I'd really like to know why that's happening, because this has never happened to me before. Maybe now you can actually hear it. So yeah, there are two different drums in here. This is more of a kick. I have a lot of reverb, a lot of delay, and a lot of echo too. And the EQ is more centered around the bass. Whereas this is the same sound in the same kind of drum, but instead of playing the bass, I play up the high end a lot more to make it more of a snare almost. And the echo happens faster. It's like quarter, whereas I'm assuming this is half. Yeah, half. And the wet on the echo is a lot more present here too, so you can hear it, as opposed to here where the echo is more subdued. So both of them work together so that you have a high end and a low end to the drum. And then here, this detuned ghost bass. Just play that. It's another alchemy sound. And I raise the mid a little bit on it, because when you play it, there's this second layer to it that's like this more of like a higher pitched synth in addition to the bass line, and I wanted to accentuate that because that was the part that would be more noticeable as being detuned. Because what I wanted to do was, where is pitch bend? Here. I wanted to lower its pitch and, you know, raise it and lower it and do like fancy stuff with it. It's not really fancy, but you know what I mean. So I really wanted to have that atmosphere of unease, where it's like, you know, you have a single note, and then you hear it like, you know, boom, into your chest, and then the aftershock lingers and echoes, but it's not quite the same as it was when the note started. You hear it move down in pitch. And I really like those kinds of effects, like subtle pitch bending. Speaking of that, here. Enjoy some of this. This I used in a very similar manner to this Cosmic Wade synth up here, where it's like a single chord. I think this is more of a chord, not a note, but it slowly pans to the right from the left and slowly moves down in pitch. Like when you have it all together. You can't really hear it that well. I wanted to like bring all these individual aspects together, where it's hard to single any one of them out, but they all contribute to the overall atmosphere of the intro. And chiptune lead is another alchemy synth that I use a lot, and I oftentimes edit it a lot here, especially to add my own sources to it. It's like a square, more of like a grindy sound, a saw in addition to the square. Because the default sounds nothing like that. It sounds nothing like that. So instead of just, you know, being content with the defaults, I do try to edit them to match more what I'm thinking of in my mind, instead of like settling with the presets. This though, this I think is a really cool sound, but I'm gonna admit it's just a note in alchemy. This isn't a bunch of like individual notes. This is just a preset. Sounds pretty cool though. These like spasmodic, twitching, glitching, machine-like noises. Then I have the low end really hidden at first, and then as the sound continues, I tone that back so that you can hear more of the bass tones in it. and it has that really satisfying, like, echo where the low end cuts out again. I really like that effect a lot. This instrument, I bounced the final version of the song and then accidentally removed every instance of the sound from the project, so I had to go back in and add it. I was listening to it and I thought to myself, no, it's great, but something's missing. I don't know what it is. It took me a long time to figure out what it was, and then I remembered, shit, it was the glitching machine. So I put that back in last minute. And this is yet another sound. We have not too many more of these left. This is an 80s sync lead, another alchemy instrument. Notice a bit of a theme here. This sound particularly, I really liked the way it ebbed and flowed. It has this undercurrent to it, of like, you know, this. I guess it kind of is like a flanger, but it's more like a sync kind of sound because it's a sync lead. That was something I liked a lot because that reminded me of a lot of like horror synthy works. That sound in particular was something that I was really going for. So I put that in. But instead of letting the sound develop, I sort of cut it off. It's a bunch of individual notes playing one after the other. And this is a sound that is throughout a lot of the song, but you don't really hear it that much because it's a little buried in the mix. But I kept it in because I felt it provided some texture to the piece through that like a little warble in its sound, even if you can't hear it that well. I can hear it. That's what matters. And this, I forget exactly, actually, I know what this is, but I can't really describe it, so I'll just play it for right now. Yeah, this is another one of those really warbly, off-putting kind of sounds, like almost scraping against something. I remember, does that, like, added kind of warble. The thing about this synth is that I manipulated it so that it was mono instead of being poly, so that it can only handle one note at a time, and then I added a glide to it, so that, am I on it right now? Yeah. So, you play this one note, you hold it, and then if you play another note, it jumps up to it. Instead of it being a clean cut from one note to the other, you hear it takes time for the sound to travel. So I would place these intermittent, what are those, E's, so that it would jump up, then down, up, down, up, down, up, down. So it was like beating along with like the flow of the track and to develop over time. What is this? Oh yeah, this is another noise channel. When it came time to do these huge sweeps of noise that would envelop the entire mix, I added a lot of echo and a lot of reverb. And this is basically the same principle as the analog poly synths up above. It's the same retro synth, but instead my bass was a mono lead for some reason, not sure why. And the EQ starts out with almost nothing listenable, except for the very low end. So you hear it low at first, the bass, and then the mids and the highs open up, so you have this sweep of noise. And that was something I tried to use a lot more in my songs after this point, because I really liked the way that sounded, but I had to be careful with how I used it, because I didn't want to overwhelm the mix with too much reverb, which is something that I worry I did a little bit on this track. But certainly Beast using a reverse cymbal was something that I also used a lot prior to this point. After this, I started experimenting more with noise sweeps instead. And this is the same mono lead, but instead of making it be a noise, I actually used the original kind of sound here. And that's another sound that's included in this intro. But I actually this one I think is barely in the mix at all. I almost forgot that existed until I just listened to it now. Changing the vibrato rate, which you can't really hear that well, but it's there. So that it's almost impossibly fast. What's that, 1/64th triplets? That's ridiculously fast. And this doesn't change at all. I don't know why that's a parameter there. Yeah, this sound, I liked the way that the pitch bended in the intro before settling on that E chord. I wanted to have a lot of those, like moments of like misalignment where a sound isn't as it should be. Sometimes for a while before it falls back into place at the end, where you get these really satisfying swells of chords and of noise. And then the last sound, the one that I'm particularly happy with, is this kind of a mess, an arpeggiated mess of noise, where I'll just play it and let it speak for itself. That sound particularly was inspired by some of the more creepy, horror-driven work on It Follows that His Attributes did with songs like Greg and Father, where you have these really discordant, clashing, almost metallic runs of arpeggiated synth lines. This isn't really very metallic, it's more subdued, but you understand what I'm going for with it. So this is Metro Bass, which is an instrument that I use in some of my earlier tracks. And to get that arpeggiated effect, because this is 4 notes held together, I have a chord trigger, I think? Yeah, chord trigger's right up here. So that instead of just those 4 notes, there are a lot of other notes being held as well. And then here's the actual arpeggio, which is also at a rate of 1/64 triplets. Which is very fast. And I think that this indicates, I forget the exact pattern that indicates, but I think it's random. Pretty sure that's random. Because I liked the way that there wasn't really a structure to it or a pattern, it just, the notes sort of like collided into each other. And then I have this flanger, another bit crusher, and echo. Bit crush, echo, reverb, those were all things I used a lot on this track. And then also panning. The instrument sweeps side to side. Again, before I knew what tremolo was. And then those are all the instruments that take up the intro. This massive sweep of noise, and then it all builds to a crescendo with this noise sweep right here. So then, at this point, you have a brief interlude before the main, the meat and potatoes of the track start, where I wanted to include a sound that was like that gritty, edgy synth in Heels after the main drum beat. Or, not the main drum beat, the introductory drum beat starts, where it's, this singular note being held and repeated for a while, and it has this air of fluctuating intensity to it, where it hits a high, then goes down to a low, then goes back up to a high, then goes down to a low. Something like that. So instead of making a synth, I actually found what I was looking for in a drum kit. Dub Smash GB is the name of the kit. And the way Logic handles drum kits, or at least some of them, is there's an electronic drum kit section, and you have Drum Machine, Drum Machine Designer, and Drum Machine GB. This is Drum Machine. And the Drum Machine sets, here's just bass dub smash, they might not even have an instrument for you to mess around with. Everything's down here. Or with Drum Machine Designer, there's a Drum Machine Designer kit to mess around with. But with the Drum Machine GB kits, everything is handled right at the start via Ultra Beat. And Ultra Beat is this kind of confusing library of basically all the different sounds that are contained in the drum beat, and you can edit them in any way you want. OS1, OS2, noise filter as well. I don't mess around with this stuff too much. There are still some things that I gotta learn, but I learned through trial and error that the OSC2 setting is what really controls the sample, as you can see right here. And if you mess around with its pitch, you can mess around with the pitch of the sample, of that specific sample, because you see there are unique settings for each and every sample in this drum kit. So I was playing around with this drum kit, and then I found this noise. There's kind of a kick sound, and then that beep, that low sustained beep. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, yes, that's what I want to use. That's that kind of a gritty, fluctuating synth that I'm going to go for. Even though it's really more of like a sustained beat, though the contrast between, the kick drum and the silence, not the silence. Okay, let me stop. The contrast between the silence, relative silence with the kick drum, and then the beep would count as the fluctuations that I was looking for. And then from that point on, I just have that singular beat contained on this channel. And then, using Ultra Beat, I edit its pitch, so that I can make the drum beat itself a part of the melody. So it basically just matches whatever chord progression is happening at that part of the song. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Clear this out a little. Now, this is... Oh, I remember what this is. So later on in the track, I use another noise sweep that, instead of fading in like it is the intro, it's a blast of noise that then echoes. So when I came up with that sound, I thought to myself, I should put it in this section, but reverse it, so that it basically acts as another build-up, which is what I do here. And then after that point, every other sound in the song cuts out, and the only thing you hear is that kick drum, and then a silence for a good second. And I wanted to have that pocket of silence so that you're left in this uncertain atmosphere for a moment where you're like, what's going to happen next? I don't know. And then suddenly, crash lightning, and then the song starts. And then you're thrust into this more overtly synth-wavy tone, as opposed to, the more ambient, atmospheric intro that I have over there. So here, some of the sounds in the intro carry over. You have that noise filter that I mentioned at the start, acting as a sort of hi-hat. You have these noise sweeps that I mentioned before as well, cascading from one speaker to the next. And here is, this is the bass from before. But instead of the attack being really subdued, it's now much more immediate, as is fitting for a bass tone. Because I figured that, a bass tone in like the actual song proper wouldn't really function as well with the incredibly long attack that it has in this part. This I already mentioned, but, this is only one of the instruments in the drum kit. I need more than that, obviously, so that's where this section comes in. So yeah, that's basically the main drum beat. It evolves and gets more dramatic as the song goes on, but that's basically the foundation to it. A little emphasis on the bass, tone back the high end just a tad. And there are a few sounds going on here. You have the kick. And then two different snares that are included in this kit. This one is more, it's longer, more sustained, whereas this one is more of a snap, a punch. And then these, added percussion clicks. And I like the idea of, instead of making it, continue this kind of a beat in the last bar, I would switch things up a little bit, have some more staccato hits. But then in this part, before like the melody starts, I switched up even more, and I thought to myself, I like the way that snare sounds a lot. So what I did was I took that in Ultra Beat and edited its panning. So that one of them is to the right and the other to the left. So even the snare has a sort of sweeping effect to it. That was something that I wanted to play around with a lot. Those kinds of like sweeps from one end of the speaker to another. Yes, I know, panning gimmicks, but I felt that they worked quite well here. I use them a lot, actually. Maybe a little bit more than I should, but what can I say? I find that they tend to work out for me most of the time. But you have to either make them slow, like they are in here, or here not be overly distracting, which I don't think they are, because I think the drums are in a pretty good spot in the mix, at least at that point. You have the bass and the drums from before. This chiptune lead carrying over from here, I have this on a separate channel than this one, because it has a different EQ to it. This has more of a high end, but the rest is untouched, whereas for this one, the low end is almost entirely cut out. And this, I wanted to act as like a sort of a sting, like a snap when the main beat starts, as almost like I don't want to say like a cymbal, but it's like like one of those kinds of like a popping moment to the track to add a little texture to it, and then that sound goes down in pitch and then fades out. It starts out pitched up too, because like I said, those brief pockets of distortion were something I tried to use a lot here. And that's one of the spots that I really used it in. This sync lead continues and almost acts as another kind of a bass tone to supplement this part. Doesn't have an overly extended bass presence, but you can hear how it adds a little flavor. And this was the aforementioned noise hit that I then reversed and stuck back up here. And I use this a lot throughout the track. Adds almost another kind of cymbal. Now this part, as I mentioned, was very inspired by Disaster Piece's title for It Follows, where you have this bass. And then this arpeggiated synth run. How does it go? So I want to do something like that here, where you have a bass and then an arpeggiated synth run with these string bells. And I use these a lot in the track too. This kind of ostinato is used a lot throughout the track. Some other synths are introduced that replicate that sound too. Not the sound, but the melody. And this, like many other sounds, has a bit crusher fed into it as well. I probably could have just slapped the global bit crusher on this thing, but there were certain sounds that I wanted to leave untouched from the bit crush. Like these, the melody, I didn't bit crush at all. And some of the other sound effects I didn't really want to be bit crushed, so I handled it more on an instrument-by-instrument basis. And then for more atmosphere, because a lot of the sounds so far were like more melodic, not really much ambience. Excuse me. So I wanted to have a synth that would provide some ambience. So I achieved that through this synth called Ghost Voices. Which is another alchemy-based synth. And as it's sustained, a lot of these interesting high-pitched textures start to develop too, as you just heard. And I cut the low end on that because I didn't really want to have it compete with the bass. On most of the synths, I tend to do that so that the low end doesn't get too cluttered. And at this part of the song, it has kind of a dramatic pitch bend up and down. Whereas later on, like right here, it's a lot more gradual. I think that's right before the chorus. Yeah, pretty sure it is. And then that's pretty much everything in the introductory part to the verse, except for here. A lot's happening here. Now, why did I include hammers hitting things in my song? I did that because there's this song about Forge. He has a lot of like a blacksmith motif to him. He carries around the giant hammer, fashions things together. You know, it's like stoking the forge, the Stoker of Nightmares. I felt it would be fitting to have some kind of like a hammer sound in there. And I was very inspired by Death's Dynamic Shroud in their album I'll Try Living Like This, which is a very, very good vaporwave album. The 7th track on that album has this really otherworldly, swirling blend of choirs and hip-hop R&B beats. And one of the tracks sampled in that song, track 7, is Drake's Now and Forever from his If You're Reading This It's Too Late mixtape. And the beat in that song has these very distinctive sounds in it that, when slowed down, sound almost like hammers. And that kind of like idea of incorporating those kinds of sound effects into a beat, I was inspired to do from Death's Dynamic Shroud and how they sampled Drake's song. So I did that here with a bunch of hammer sound effects. This one's the most distinctive, and that echoes quite a bit. And I think I have them pitched down slightly, that's more than slightly, so that they sort of fit in with the key of the song and aren't completely out of place, because just slapping them in there and calling it a day, who knows, the noise they make could not match up with the chord progression at all and just sounds off and awful. And that's, I don't think that's the same sound as this. I think those two and that are 3 entirely different hammer sounds. So, you have one here that echoes for a long time. One here that doesn't really echo at all. And then these two, which are the same sound, but I have playing twice. One panned almost entirely to the left and one panned almost entirely to the right. And those basically stereo separate the sound so that it has more of a presence to it. Because I want that to be kind of like a clap. And hold on. I wanted those claps sort of act in concert with this very loud, rhythmic bass drum echoing. Why does the echo keep cutting out? This is getting a little ridiculous. Where is it again? Up here. I really want to know why this is. This is dumb. Okay. Where are they? Here. And that did nothing. You know what? I'm not going to question it. No, I'm just not going to question it. But you understand what I mean. You hear it echo on each beat, and some of those echoes are supplemented with this kind of a clap. And I wanted those to sort of like work in tandem. And all those different sounds combine to create this. You have your main beat, and then all these other subtler textures, like that chiptune lead that I mentioned, the 80s sync lead, that undulating ghost voices pan. And I try to add a lot of those little details in my songs, instead of it just being, you have a melody, a bass, drums. I try to have a lot more dynamic texturing involved as well. To make things hard for me, but also I find that having it be more detailed is satisfying to work on, to have it all come together and to pull everything off. That's something that I really enjoy doing. And now we get to the melody. And the melody, compositionally, was very inspired by the title melody and It Follows, where it has these runs from high to low or low to high. But I don't think it's aped off it at all. Like, I had it in mind working on it, but I think it is its own unique kind of a thing here. And I have this sound, this melody, I'll just play it right here. Maybe a little bit melodramatic. Maybe a little. So this sound, I wanted to get a sound, or a melody, that had the presence of Disaster Piece's melody, like the synth he used to write that. Because that sound, that synth, has a really nice glide to it. Where, instead of, like I said before, instead of like snapping from one note to another, it's like a gradual bend up or a gradual bend down. I wanted to capture those subtleties, those pitch bends. And I wanted the instrument to be like sharp, but also have a lasting presence to it. So I did that by layering 3 different synths together. I think these are all massive-based synths, yeah. This one is... No, I guess I made this myself. So yeah, it's this very simple kind of low-end hit. Not really much of a lasting presence to that. That's more for like the immediate impact, and then it fizzles out, kind of. No reverb to speak of. And I added this additive 5 oscillator and raised its pitch up an octave. Otherwise, that gives it more of a presence at least. That's the real meat and potatoes of the sound. Amp raised pretty high up there. So that sound, not incredibly memorable. This one occupies the high end here. No low end to speak of, and I raised treble a little. I think a lot of distinctiveness in the lead comes from this sound. This is one that I really tried to own in on and make it sound as good as I could make it. This one has a lot of reverb on it and also echo. And that I used to help give the synth lead that presence that I was hoping it would have. Because I like that kind of idea a lot, where the afterimage remains, so to speak, of the sound. That's also in Massive. That I got from a preset. I don't remember exactly how I modified it, but I'm pretty sure I did a little. It's called SWAT. And this final sound also has reverb and echo attached to it, but this sound occupies the mid. Cut out the high, cut out the low. That's the Telecollective preset. And I don't remember exactly how I modified that either. What I could do is set up a new instrument here, AU Instruments Native Massive, and test this out a little. Why not? Got time. What was the first one called? SWAT. SWAT is down here still. Here we go. And I don't have it soloed. There we go. So this sound is a lot more gritty, a lot more bubbly under the surface. Something's brewing. For the actual sound, I changed it to be a little bit more cleaner. There's still kind of a dirty edge to it, but drowned out, not as noticeable. And I accomplished that mostly with the EQing of it. And here's the Massive preset for the actual, the version that's in the song. I don't think I actually changed it all that much. Did I? No. I don't think I changed it incredibly. I tweaked other instruments in Massive more, or like made my own. Some of them I did keep relatively the same and edited them with the EQ and other things. I tend to use EQ a lot when shaping how I want synths to sound, instead of just straight up volume to accentuate certain parts, cut out others that I don't want to add as much. EQ is something that I use constantly when making my songs. I consider it invaluable. Right up there with reverb. Bit crush isn't particularly necessary. I don't use it a lot. I use it a lot here, but I don't really use it that much in most of my other work. Echo 2 I also tend to use quite a bit. So this is Telecollective. That is loud. I don't think I edited that much, just to EQ it and to really lower the volume on it, because that is loud. Oh. Shit. That was bad. Okay, I think we should be good now. So now all these together create that very distinctive sound. Has a ebb and flow to it that I also accomplished by pitch bending it at certain parts. And that's something that I had to do for each synth individually. You know, get that out. Pitch bend. And you can see for certain notes, pitch bends down just, slightly. Don't want it to be incredibly noticeable, but like, enough for there to, noticeable is the wrong word. I want it to be noticeable, but I don't want it to like be overwhelming or overbearing. It's just a subtle little bend. Like I said, those moments where something's not quite right with the sound. That's what I really want to try and get with this track. And in this run, specifically, they all play the same melody. But then later on, like here, they change. They don't all play the same notes. Oh yeah, in certain parts I did sustain a note and then bend it down to another. That is something I also did here. And that's when the pitch bend will be very gradual. And then for those notes, I made the brief little spikes in the pitch bend, where it's like a little flick. Like, you can't really hear that. Something like that. Now for this swat, I made the run very complicated and added a bunch of layers to it. Which I think makes for a very satisfying sound, but that kind of an intensity is not really replicated in the other two. So now this very simple chord progression goes from E down to C. No, E, yeah, E, D, C, A, B. Pretty simple. And this is like really the main verse part right here. So now, at this point, once I have the melody introduced, some of the other sounds I change. For instance, here, this hi-hat noise that I mentioned before. I clip off the ends of it, and I recorded it as an audio file, and then only allowed certain snippets of it to play through. Why did I do that? I don't really know. I just kind of liked the way it sounded, and I wanted to have it be like, this is the hi-hat. This is the hi-hat being played like it's open. And then there you close it and just tap on it a little bit. Just to make things a little bit more dynamic, but it's not really incredibly noticeable in the final mix. This is just the main bass. I think what this track really could have benefited from was more of a sub bass. I think I could have used that, but I didn't include one. Skip, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I know you told me to include one of those, and then I didn't do it. This is the main drum beat. I don't think that was changed from its earlier version. But then, once the verse peaks, and right before the chorus, then I tweak it a little. Right here, where I have the snare repeat a bunch. And at that point, it is supposed to oscillate panning-wise again, which it does. I thought it said that it would oscillate with each individual synth hit, but no, it's just those two patterns. All right, whatever, that's fine. The sync lead changes a little bit to follow the chord progression. Here I have, some more noise hits. And this is another gradual rise up, like there was at this point, culminating in an analog hit, noise hit. For the second iteration of this melody, I doubled the string bells. For this, I did find it necessary to have 2 instruments instead of just one, because the repeats, the echoes, I made be slightly quieter. And this was panned to the right, so I panned the repeats to the left. Otherwise, I think they're pretty much the same. And I did that to give that part a little more presence to it, instead of, I felt like this was a little too slow, especially later on when the track gets more intense. I felt it would be a good idea to have the arpeggios repeated a little. I bring back the ghost voices here, where they act as more of a traditional pad, instead of being really creepy ambience. They don't pitch bend too much. Really nice textures on that one. Thanks, Alchemy. Alchemy is really great. I need to use it more often. And then, like I said, the verse is really split up into 2 parts. One iteration of the melody, and with another more complicated iteration. For the second iteration, I added 2 new instruments. This is a big saw bass, which, although being labeled as a bass, I didn't really use as a bass. I cut out the low end almost entirely and bumped up the high end a bunch on that. And this is an ES2 sound. ES2, I don't really know my way around too much. I usually just tweak some of the individual tunings on it. Some of this stuff I play around with a little bit, changing the cutoff, resonance, the drive a little. And here's attack, decay, sustain, release, all that good stuff. And this also controls if it's mono or poly, how many notes you can press at once. I tend to mess around with those a lot, but other than that, I don't do too much with ES2. So this I wanted to use to really have those impactful hits, where it's almost like a cymbal crash with how fierce and loud that tone is. Like, hear that? I don't really allow the bass much room to sustain itself, at least in the low end, because I have other instruments for that, like main bass. They do work pretty well together. So that's basically another layer to the bass. And I lead into it with this here. I recorded a single note of the bass, saved it as an audio file, and then put it in reverse. Right here. And I have that hooked up to... What do I have that hooked up to? Oh, nothing. It's just, you have that distinctive, sweep where it goes... Because that's basically just the reverse of how that sound plays out. And I have it pitched down a step using the new pitch thing. And that was because at this part of the song, it's not really in E, it's more in B, with some of the synths being played in E flat, so there's an E flat. So you have that kind of a lead in, which I also do earlier, like right here. Before the synths start playing, I bounce them and did a lead in that way too. But for that I kept it in the same key, because there's no chord modulation up until the melody kicks in, funny enough. So now, that's everything in the verse, and now we are in the chorus. And the chorus was also inspired by the title, where it changes keys, does this really dramatic run with the melody, with a lot of, spooky, creepy textures in the background, and big drum beat was like dun, dun. Where like instead of the drums being digital, they're more like acoustic, like a really loud thudding kick. Although I didn't implement that here, but I wanted it to be powerful, really like more loud and aggressive than like any other part of the song so far. So this is the chorus. Pretty short compared to the verse. And it only goes on for, 1, 2... I don't let it finish. It only goes on for 7 bars, and on the 8th, it goes right back into the verse. And I kind of like that idea of cutting it off. I thought that was pretty interesting, where you expect to go on for another, but then the chord progression changes on you, and just spits you right back out into the verse. Tried to have those moments of, unexpectedness to the beats, that you'd always be on your toes again. Forge is mean, it's nasty. I wanted the track to kind of reflect that, the way it plays out. Always shifting, always changing. I have the analog synth there, the noise filter there, noise filter there, and the drums. Well, this is the bass. Not really much to speak of there. And throughout all this, I have the throughout all this, I have the that distinctive alarm-based kind of a gritty sound, changing its pitch to match the melody of the actual piece. That was really hard to do because the pitch stuff in Old Beat was really finicky, at least with this project file. But in the final mix, I think it turned out perfectly. Of course, when I play it back now, there are going to be some flaws. The drum beat became 3 times more complicated. So what I did here was I added an actual hi-hat using Dub Smash GB again. But I made it on a new channel so that the low end wasn't cut out like it was, not the low end, the high end wasn't cut out here like it was. Now it's completely present, because if the high end's cut out, the hi-hat, you won't be able to hear the hi-hat, are you? And the actual drum beat I made a lot more complicated. I added a lot more of those snare runs where it would pan from one speaker to the next. And I would play a snare and like the click together. And I tried to do a lot more dynamic composition with the snares than I had previously in the song. So I wanted this to be more of a powerful moment. I wanted the drums to really hit you with their intensity. Here I think I make the snare pitch down a tiny bit. Those, I think that should be more over here. More over here, because those are pretty far. Yeah, it should be more something like that, but whatever. And then I felt that just those two dub smash instruments weren't enough, so I added another one into the mix, Modern Club. Like, that sounds nice, but something that Dub Smash EB was missing was toms. I needed toms in here. So that's where Modern Club came in, and I used that really as my main source for toms. And added, like, percussion hits. Why can I... Oh, wrong instrument. Modern Club, I've used in some of my other songs for its very distinctive toms. They hit hard. And I also raised the mid-range on a little too, so that those hits, like here, can be accented a little bit greater. A little louder, hear them a little bit more. So all those three percussion tracks work together to make the main beat here. And the detuned ghost bass that was providing that really heels-like bass line. I have mirror the other bass instruments, but I don't pitch bend it because I figured at that point in the song that would make it sound a little too discordant, but not in a good way. Like, not in a way that adds to the tension, just makes it unpleasant to listen to, where it's like, it sounds kind of bad. It doesn't really add anything. So I didn't have any pitch bend there. The 80s sync lead changed the chord progression. This changed the This is more noise stuff. This doesn't really change throughout the song. I mostly just detailed how I set it up, and then that's pretty much it as far as the noise filters go. They're just there. The string bells I made, instead of each one of these mirroring each other, I composed unique runs for each of the channels. And instead of just continuing the same beat from before, I wanted to add a new ostinato for the chorus. A lot of these are like small things that, like, when I point them out now, maybe you'll be able to pick up on them more, but everything kind of gets lost in the overall mix, I think. But I hope that it's rewarding to catch, like, those small details where, like, you notice an instrument that you didn't really hear the first time around. I tend to layer things a lot with my production. These sort of complicated, almost ambient pieces, even though there's a lot going on in them. I don't want to say wall of sound, because I don't think this is very wall of sound-like, but there's definitely a lot going on, more than there seems to be. So I added some new synths here, right there, and then there are also a lot down here that I added. So I'll focus on these two first. This I kind of wanted to be a recurring synth kind of sound, where that would be in the high end, the very, very high end, where it's a little metallic, a little grating. Not really inspired by anything in particular. I just felt that the chorus was kind of lacking that. Something really up in the high end. So this sound has two parts to it. This plucked kind of, it's not a bell. Can't really call it a bell. But, you know, this, like, kind of plucked kind of synth where it's like, you know, a little bubble in space. That also has a collide on it, too, but very subtle. And this is a sound in Massive called Formant Acid. It's a smooth analog lead here. The name of the track is Cocoon Discovery, but then the actual instrument, Formant Acid. I really need to get better at organizing what I name things in Logic, because it just makes me confused. And this is where the metallic edge came in. These are playing the same run here, but this has that gritty, grinding edge to it that I wanted the sound to have. And here, I finally wisened up and used tremolo. Tremolo is great for modulating the panning. So, rate is 1 bar. So, that means that it undergoes a full left, right, left thing in 1 bar. So, here's left, after this is right, after that's left. And the depth is 50%, which means that even when it's towards the left, you can still hear some of the sound at the right end. If I were to change the depth to 100, it would be only the left, and you couldn't hear it at all on the right. And this smoothing basically means how gradual is the change from left to right. If it's 0, it's just a hard cut. Which isn't as noticeable here because I actually have the sound cut out a little before it would turn to the right. So it just sounds like it's a sound to the left, then a sound to the right, as opposed to the sound awkwardly and uncomfortably, jaggedly shifting from left to right. That was something I tried to pay a lot of attention to. I want it to be uncomfortable, but not in like a way where you don't want to listen to it. I want it to be like, to grab your attention with all these disparate sounds. Now, writing the chorus melody, I wanted to incorporate more pitch bending, but also much more like in an extreme way than in the verse. The verse is like only the beginning of the modulation. Let me bring up the pitch bend here. So yeah, you can see that as I sustain the note at the end of the chorus, you have this very gradual pitch bend. You get the idea. And these sort of slight deviations in the pitch bending here too. Where are we? Here. Yeah, there we go. What am I doing? Now, where the pitch bend is really at its most prominent is here. I have an entirely new set of the 3 instruments. Now, why do I have this? It's just to play this one part. And why is that? So the way Massive works is that the pitch bending you set up in a certain part of the synth, and I don't remember exactly where that is. You have to try and find that. Is it here? No, it's not there. That's not it. It's not on the envelopes. It's going to be routing. Cool. Where is it? Here. Here's where it is. Ask. So what was that before? Oh, no, okay. So you can set numbers for the range of how far up and how far down a pitch bends. So you have this kind of a note. Goes from a C to a G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7 up. And down. It's 5 down to another G. So that's for here. So what I wanted to do was goes I wanted the sound to go from here all the way up to there. So instead of just the that it does before. But I had done pitch bends earlier, and those were with very gradual pitch bends in mind. So you see here, it's up 5, down 5. And to go from requires 7. So these are basically the same as that, but the up is 7 instead of 5. Now, these are like the small things that I want to work out to make the vision that's in my head like a reality. It's like these little things that you gotta pay attention to. There might have been an easier way to get around that. Maybe I can automate pitch bend parameters in Massive, but if I can do that, then I have not found out how yet. And I'll leave it at that. The hammer sound effects are cut out entirely. I don't have them in the chorus. This big saw bass, not really anything. Oh, there's a sound I forgot to mention. That first pops up here, and then also is in the chorus as well. This, Fifth Dimension. That's an arpeggiator that comes with Logic. I don't really have a way to directly modify it. I think it just added the reverb to it, really. And that's a pretty interesting arpeggiator. Really cool. And it creates these chords out of just a single note. So if you have multiple notes, that's an E flat major 7th right there. Has a lot of interesting notes in there. And those are like really warbly, bubbly kind of sounds that are, you know, popping in and out of existence there. And I have that panned left to right too. That's like, you know, one of those sounds like you don't really notice that much. You notice it more for like the noises, like the atonal noises that it throws out there. It's like, you notice those more in the mix than the actual notes. But the notes just, you know, they add to the chord progression. This is a sound that I wanted to have in here a lot. So this is, believe it or not, a sub bass. Yeah, I neutered it, basically. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Sub bass, I want instrument default patch. So we can get the sub bass in here. This is what the heavy sub bass normally sounds like. Very, very deep low end there. But instead I made it sound like this. What I wanted to have was that sort of a sound. It's like almost a theremin that here like has like that cliche spooky vibe to it, but I wanted to stick it in the song in such a way that it would also add to the high end in a similar way to this part. Whoops. But it wouldn't be as grating metallically. It would be more like have more of a buzz to it. There was a certain sound that I think I was really inspired by when trying to implement that, but I forget exactly what it was. I think it might have been in the title for It Follows in the chorus. You have this really high-pitched synth playing the melody in the chorus like 2 or 3 octaves up, and that has like that same sort of a buzz to it. I think that's what I was going for when I implemented this. So this is an alchemy. I changed it from being a dark drone to more of a hollow lead. What else did I do? Let me find out. That might be pretty much all I did to it. This is the boring part. And the view is huge too. Can I make it smaller? Alright, cool, I can. No, I want that. Thanks. So this is the default version, and this is the version that's in my song. Then I just changed from Dark Drone to Hollow Lead there. That might be pretty much all I did to it. Yeah. Is there a way to change the glide on it? Because I definitely did that. Yeah, I also changed the glide. Whereas right here, it's not really very present. Here, I manipulated that a bunch. That's pretty much most of the ways I changed that sound. And I did a few other things too. Bit Crusher is there quite a bit. That's a pretty heavy bit crush. 4 times downsampling, 3-bit resolution. So it's very, it loses a lot of the sound there. It becomes a lot more jagged. Otherwise it would sound more like this. And you got a lot more of that static. And I cut out the low end almost entirely. And this I think is the high end, but then not the high end, but like high octaves, and then I also added another run. And that's in the lower octaves. I accentuated the low end there, and the bit crush, I think it's the same actually. But there's no reverb to speak of. And together, those two kind of work together to have this really glidey, theremin-like, stereotypical spooky UFO kind of sound. But I think it works out pretty well, actually. I love the way that it's like that gradual build up and then build back down to that D, then back down to the B. That I'm pretty proud of, not gonna lie. Alright, and then 2 other synths here to add to the texture of the chorus. Because when it comes to the chorus, I want there to be a lot of dynamic shifting sounds in it. Instead of it just being, the same as the verse. I want there to, be more stuff in it. And that plays, that's an alchemy synth right there. Accentuated the mids, cut out the high and the low. Oh. Oh no. It was right here. Because the thing about alchemy is that you can change it. You can, like this bar you can set, you can actually make it be in between different sections. Like, voices, closer. Like, let's like test out what these all would sound like. Oh, it sounds kind of quiet. But you can hear I was pretty much uninterrupted there. That's a lot more warbly. That's like cutting out, like interference. That's more of the, gated kind of sound that I was going for. Oh, that sounds really cool, actually. That has a ton of reverb added to it, more like squelchy kind of sounds. So I settled between a mix of all of those, kind of. So you see how alchemy gives you a lot of options when it comes to determining what you want a synth to sound like. And then the last one I have here was Phasing Sweeper, which is ES2. Which is, a pretty straightforward, it's a pan with a pretty hefty phaser attached to it, playing basically the same chord progression as that interrupted voices thing right there. And I have a spreader attached to it, so that it's a stereo spread basically. Otherwise, see, it places it more in the extremes to the left and the right as opposed to being more in the middle. And that's when I tend to do that to certain sounds so that not everything's clustered up in the middle. There are things that occupy more of the extremes as opposed to just panning something to the left and panning something to the right. That's something I try to do sometimes. I think there's some other sounds here that are spreaded, but I forget exactly which ones those are. And then down here are like 2 outtakes that I'll get to later. I basically used those when I was planning the track, which is what I'll leave it at that for right now. Now, what else is there? Basically a second iteration of this first part, which was right here. I play that again now that the chorus is finished before we get into the second verse. So, nope, that's too late. Basically the same as what came before it, but with some added instruments to it this time around. Those are the same. Those are the same. The drum beat from before, from the chorus, I preserve and added a fiddle to it. Because I didn't really want to go back to like the more simple drums from here. Not that I'd experiment on them now, so I wanted to preserve that kind of intensity. And those are in there too. This stays the same. This stays the same. This stays the same. This, now you have to add it. Echo to it. And here, I kept these around now for a while. And they basically play off the ostinato I have developing here. These 3 in particular really go well together. This provides more of that edge. And this one is second verse territory. The melody plays out and dies down, and all these added pans and stuff for the chorus go away too. The hammers come back, and then I add in this instrument. This is an instrument, I think this is the very last thing I added to the song. I added this when I was done with everything else, and I thought, you know what, this seems like it could fit in pretty well. This is basically another version of string bells. Sorry. It's basically another version of string bells. And I added tremolo to here too. And I made the rate beat offside a little bit. It's not exactly quarter or half or anything. It's, I think, quarter dotted. Which is pretty odd. It doesn't sound like you'd expect it to. And how did I differentiate it from this string bell? I cut out the low end, didn't really do anything to the high end, and it mostly is in a lower octave, I think. I might have done some extra things to the actual sound of the instrument too. This is another retro synth based instrument here. Yes, okay, I did. I changed it from FM to table. You see, okay, the way RetroSynth works is that there are 4 main settings to the oscillator, which really determines the sound. You can have analog, sync, table, and FM. And analog is what all the noise filters are set to. FM is the mainstream bells, and table is this new one that I added into the second iteration. And let me check the 80s sync lead. Where's that? Oh, that's Alchemy, never mind. So, when I'm using a retro synth instrument, I tend to switch these a few times to try and pick a sound that I like the most and like what most fits what kind of a sound I'm going for. I use them all like, in different scenarios. Analog's the best at getting that noise filter. Sync is noticeable for that like really distinctive sync sound that you can hear in the 80s sync lead, even if that's not a retro synth instrument. And FM is like pretty glossy too. And table is this kind of a sound. And that mirrors what's going on with the main string bells up here. And that's the second interlude, I guess. Now, for the second verse, I knew I didn't want to make this be exactly like the last verse, so I thought to myself, what can I do? And then I realized, I'll change the chord progression. So now, this entire time the song has been pretty much in the key of E, so I bring it a whole step down, and now we are in D. This part of the song, I kind of wanted to be another quiet moment, like the intro, where I wanted things to be a little bit mysterious, uncertain, as then the track builds and builds and builds, and spirals, until suddenly we're right back to where we were at that level of intensity, with a new twist introduced into the sound of the composition. So, one of the things I did from this point on was I changed the noise filter that was acting as the hi-hat. So before it was, it was that, but now I made it an audio file and chopped it up. So now it sounds somewhat like this. I couldn't help myself, I had to go collision course. So I took the sound, then chopped it up, repeated some parts, reversed some parts, made it spasm, made it stutter, glitched it up. And I thought that was really interesting texture, so I threw that in there. The bass, it's the same bass as before, just changed the notes to match up the chord progression now. The chord progression is like D, then A flat, down to G, and then back to D. But then I ended up making it go from an A flat down to a G, and then to a C instead of to a D. And that G at first is like a C minor. Like, where can I hear? So you have like D, and then it goes. Well, it's not even a G minor, C major, so it's like. But instead of that, it goes. But then, because the chord starts out in C major, halfway through it switches from to. Goes back to major. Well, I guess B. And then the chorus starts up again. So I tried to do some interesting stuff with the progression here, so it wasn't just, the same few chords throughout. I tried to mix things up a little. And, where was I? Yeah, I was up here. So this is pretty much the same. You have this, that same, bah, bah, bah. Doesn't change its rhythm a lot, but for this part of the song, I wanted to make it be a lot more fast-paced, so I changed the way it's played. And I have a low pass there too. That's not right. There we go. Like I said, the pitch bend is kind of messed up here. But you get the idea of it. And at this part, I cut out the drums. See, there's nothing here. The cymbals are there, playing a different rhythm, and then I bring them back. And I play both snares at the same time there. I wanted to have one of those kinds of, snare runs. And then what I do here, because like I said, this is supposed to be sort of a callback to the earlier part of the song with the ambience, the unease. I bring back some of the instruments from the first part of the song. Like this, that undulating cosmic waves. That gets brought back. But I play it in a much lower register. So it has a different sound to it, not as high-pitched anymore. That is pretty high-pitched, though. And then, I bring back these two chiptune leads. One of them from the intro here, and another from this verse. And I set them both against each other. Panned separately, pitch bended separately, but they resolve into the D minor chord that is emblematic of this verse. And adding this here, I think adds really interesting layer to this chord, because that pops in right as this chord is resolved. This almost reminds me of like the THX kind of sound, where you bring those two, like this like sweeping, shifting mass of chords, and then they suddenly pitch bend into like this triumphant, majestic, really loud chord. That's like the kind of thing that I was going for here. I don't know, smaller scale, of course. But I hope compositionally you can see what I was going for. It makes sense. This now, all this plays a different ostinato than before to match the chord progression. Bouncing from one figure to the other. And this just plays one note for a while, but then I end up giving it its own run. And now, for the melody, at first, I only have it be this middle one, swat, which I think is one that has the most presence, as I said. But then later on, the other two do join in. And there isn't really much pitch bending there, or any. Ghost voices, I forget exactly what I did with it here. I think it's just playing that chord. Yeah, and then here just place the different chords in the progression. You have the hammers, and then that's about it. Then you have the second part, where things get much more hectic. Something with the bass. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Starting from the chorus on, I play the video star, that kick, it plays at twice the speed now. Before it would echo 4 times. Now it only is time to echo twice before a new note is played. So now in this new part, this all stays the same. The drums get an added layer of complexity again. I go ham on the kick drum there. I forgot I played the kick drum that much. Bring back those not pitch bends, the pans and the snare. But yeah, here I wanted the drums here to really highlight the frenetic nature of this verse. Whereas the first verse was more menacing, this one's more threatening. It's like Forge is onto now. He's on the prowl. He's on the hunt. The cymbals reflect that too. They're a lot more fast-paced as they were not here. Now they are a lot more faster. This part I allow to linger for a little while. The sync lead comes back, and D now is supposed to E. This all stays the same. This, as I said, gets its own run. Again, a compliment what's going on here with the string bells. These 4 instruments really work in tandem. And then I have a new melody, of course. These 3 different instruments here are playing I'm pretty sure they're all playing different runs, actually. I guess I'll show them all individually. Or pitch bends again. That one I tried to have occupy the lower registers. This one's all over the place. And this one's the last. Oh, you know, they all have the same sort of idea to them, but I have them occupy different notes so that it's like they're playing different chords almost. I tried to not, you know, what am I trying to say here? Like, when you're layering synths like this, most of the time I usually just have them play the same run, but I figured this time, you know, like I could mix things up a little bit, have them occupy more notes, have more power, more of like a force to what they're trying to play here by occupying these different chords as opposed to, you know, just like a single melody. In that regard, it becomes something a lot more dynamic. This all stays the same. These instruments come back. Nothing really to write home about here. And then this is an interlude before the second iteration of the chorus. Which is how I mentioned before, you have the second verse. How here it's D, then goes to A flat G, then goes back down to D, A flat G, but instead of going down to D, goes to C, C minor. And then here goes up to C major, because when the chorus starts, that's also in C major before going to E, or it goes like E, B flat, E, A, G, D. So I wanted to put it in C minor, but then turn it back up to C major. So here, we'll start back from the top. Here, I have that time as mentioned before, but I wanted to bring back the more standard noise sweep. So I fade this out, then fade this back in. So we get that sound back. But then I think I do bring this back for the outro. I do, yes. This all stays the same. The bass I have go down an octave. So dynamic. And the reason it does that particular arpeggio, I'll show that later. This is, I think, a reprise of that sound from the beginning. Yeah. To give this part even more weight, I wanted there to be a lot of build-up, so that when the final chorus comes, it's more rewarding. I gotta set this into car seat headrest. Anyway, the drums take on a structure that isn't like anything they've really done before. The cymbals slow down. There's a ride in there, yeah. And then they pan all over the place. They get all, like, they spiral almost out of control before coming back into focus for the chorus. This is a kick that I haven't used at this point in the song yet. That's more of like a straightforward kick. Before, the kick I was using was a lot more gritty, a lot more crunchy. Now where's the one that I'm using? Here. That, you know, has more of a drive to it, more of a kick to it. And here is, I think, like a cymbal. Yeah. Oh, that's where the ride is. So what's here? The hi-hat. Okay. Yeah. So that part is to reflect like the more slow, pensive nature of that part of the song. You know, I didn't want the drums to continue being fast-paced. Not yet, at least. They'll pick up in the chorus. And here I do bring the video start back to how they normally were, but the detuned bass I extend much more than it's ever been extended before. It gets really gritty. Before it was more like, you know, ghostly, like it's a ghost bass. It's like, you know, floating on the edge. It's like, but then you really hear that gritty kind of a feel to it. And that is a sound that I wanted to achieve because that's the kind of a sound that was in Father, Disaster Beast's track Father. The track starts with this like 2-minute drone of this gritty, crunchy, like really off-putting bass line. And it just like holds on that note. And then it gradually gets more and more gritty until suddenly the track just like is subsumed by this mess of arpeggiated synths, and then it really starts. But like, at that point, it just builds and builds and builds and builds on that note. And that's something that I wanted to have in the bass at this point. I bring back here again a lot of the sounds from the intro. These come back. No pitch bend associated with them this time, though. Then they change to reflect the shift from minor to major. I bring back the glitching machine back, if you remember that. There's some kind of modulation associated with the sound in Alchemy, where if you modulate it up to the top, it becomes this sort of high-end whistle, and then when you bring it back down, that's when all the glitching starts to surface up, so I play around with that a little bit. The sync lead gets the most adventurous that it ever gets in the song. And I think that's the most prominently you ever hear in the song. And like that's when it doesn't really get as buried as it is. And this track, before I used it in a really weird way, if you remember. You know, it's that sound. I don't have time to play the whole thing, but now I make it occupy more of the high end, as opposed to being more of like a creepy sound. So a lot of the sounds from the intro I re-employ here, but for more of a melodic purpose. Bring them back. This all plays its own unique thing. And they go up to D because this is why. You'll notice that some of the instruments have been doing that. I tend to like design a lot of my composition around the melody and the general chord progression, and then I fit a lot of the atmospheric sounds to provide ambience or texture around that. So like this is like the first thing I thought about when I came up with this section, and I wanted to get it right. It took a while to get it right. So that's the track that I mentioned before. It has that really large pitch bend. The hole's on a C chord. So then I use those two different channels for the synths to create effect here by having it sustain on that note, that chord, then fades out, and then from the fade out, you build up to this extra arpeggio up here. Where the sound builds up like in a major scale as opposed to a minor scale, and it goes from C up to D, then back down to C. Because I figure just making it play around with C for 2 measures would be a little bit boring, so I added a little twist in there. Couldn't help myself. Oh boy, this was complicated to do. Very complicated. That part actually was pretty fun to write. I like those sweeping arpeggios kind of things. Ghost voices, you know, standard, following the chord progression. The hammers come back. This comes back. This comes back too. But they fade in. Although all those sounds of the chorus, I slowly fade in so that when the chorus comes, they don't come in out of nowhere. I wanted that part to be gradual to like let them introduce themselves a little bit. Then this whole part is pretty much the exact same as the previous chorus. There might be a little bit more going on with the drums. Maybe an added cymbal. Yeah, there's an added cymbal right there. Other than that, though, it's pretty much the same. Except, I wanted this chorus. I didn't want this chorus to be the same as the first chorus, in a similar manner to how I didn't want the second verse to be the same as the first verse. So, before I mentioned how I truncated the chorus so that it only played 7 bars instead of 8, and I continued that, but now I made the 7th bar completely unique, and I made it go to B, because it goes, progression goes C, B, E, B flat, A, G, D, C, E, and then A flat, B flat, I mean, A, G, E. But instead I went B flat, B, which from there could then spiral right back into C, and we do another round of the chorus. And then from there, you finally get your long, drawn-out conclusion to the end. So that was something compositionally that I really wanted to do. Like, go, that's not all. But wait, there's more. You'll get a second chorus absolutely free. Just pay separate processing and handling. I like to have those moments, as I said before, where the progression's sort of unpredictable, but you get the hang of it when you listen to it. So, I don't know if I'm even going to play this again, because there's not really anything unique about it. It's just how I changed the different instruments to reflect that switch in the progression at this part, I can just play the melody. And then the track goes insane. So I'll just play this next part of the chorus, and I'll get into what I did to it. Give me a B, give me an L, give me a U, give me an E, give me a B, give me an A, give me an L, give me an L, give me an S. What does that spell? Blue balls. Sorry, I didn't let that chord progression resolve. I will, and it will be glorious. That was the part of the song that I had the most fun writing by far. How to get it to end in this long, gnarly, twisted chord. That went probably the most extreme in terms of pitch bend that the track ever gets. So it's the same progression as before. In this part, you have where is it? This bass. I'll play the bass for right now, so that you can see how it's similar but also different. So you have, oh, that's, there we go. B flat, A, G, before we go to D, but now it goes B flat, A, G, F sharp, F, D, E. So you have those added notes to it there, so that becomes like a scale downwards before going back up to E. That was an effect that I really wanted to add to the song. So, how do I get to there? So I brought back the glitched up noise, as I said, and I called it Forge Gate Noise, because Forge, Paranatural Forge theme, and the gate noise because it's a noise gate. That's like the name of like when the sound warbles and wobbles like that. And that's just the bass. That's the doesn't sound right. There we go. I cut out the buzz for the final chord progression, I think. And now for here, I went ham on the drums. This is the most frenetic the drums ever get. I think there's an added kick I put in here. But I don't remember where it is. I'm going to try and find that. Here it is. That's an added kick I put in there because I was unhappy with how low intensity the kick was, so I wanted to give it some more kick to it, no pun intended. But I don't really think it turned out that well because it's not incredibly noticeable. Like, it's unnoticeable at best and distracting at worst. I'm not really happy with that part, but it sort of basically just doubles the main kick with some extra beats in there. And this is the most complicated the kick and snare patterns ever get. But then once the downwards chord progression starts, things get simpler. But the snare does not. It starts, going. And then I think I end up pitching it downwards for the final hits. That, again, should be more to the left, so it goes like... But you get the idea again. And I do that because I really like the way that, like, a downwards snare hit like that sounds. As opposed to, like, snare hits climbing upwards. That's, like, how a build-up normally goes. But this isn't really a build-up. It's a build-down from the build-up into, like, a sense of finality. You don't build up into nothing. C418, take notes. So yeah, in the modern club here, provide that tom. That mostly stays the same, I think, throughout. That doesn't really get any more complex. Oh wait, I was looking in the wrong spot. Yeah, it gets more complex at that point. And the cymbals, I think, yeah, those get more complex as well. This stays the same. This stays the same. Like, of course, they do change at this spot to reflect the progression, but like, I don't really add anything to them. Here, I think, mostly stays the same. Yeah, and then... It's hard to, like, figure out how to best write those to fit the chord progression, because, like, I have, like, a set pattern that I have to make them adhere to, and, like, figuring out how to write that around the chord progression is a little bit tricky. Sometimes it doesn't always work. I think for the most part it does. And then here, I did want to come up with an entirely different melody for this iteration of the chorus. But for the final chord progression, I didn't want to have it go off in, like, a noodly, like, big tangent. I wanted it to stick very closely to the chord progression. So the chord progression was itself the melody, because I felt that was, like, a very powerful, gripping point to the song, where it's like those last big hits before the finale. I wanted to give them a lot of weight. They do end up playing some different notes with each other so that they end up encompassing the chords themselves. And I think I do slowly raise them in volume at this point, because I can't help myself. Yeah. 0.7 to 3.6. Alright, that's pretty dramatic. At least for that one, that's the loudest out of them. I think. Yeah. I bring ghost voices back for this iteration of the chorus, which usually does not play in the chorus. Doesn't play in the other one. That's like playing sevenths, I think. That didn't turn out too great. Yeah. And then all this part at the bottom, I think plays pretty much the same as it did before. Instead of making the heavy sub bass go down, I made it like fully. I made it go down and then back up, which I think provides a nice little contrast for the rest of the instruments that almost all exclusively go down. And then I added 3 new instruments to this part of the chorus, and these I wanted to occupy the high end in a similar way to the heavy sub bass. I wanted them to also capture that gritty sound in the title of It Follows, as I mentioned prior. So I have an icy synth lead, which is an alchemy instrument. Which has a very gradual tremolo to it. And that has a really, like, shaky, rattly sound to it that I really enjoyed, and I thought, I want to put this in the song. Just like, yeah, Shudder. That's the name of the preset I used for that. And then I have String Ensemble Tremolo. I edited that so thoroughly, I did not remember that was a string until I looked at the file just now. I thought that was some kind of a synth. I added a pretty spacious reverb to it. I added a lot of bit crush to it, and I added a flanger to it so that it sounds a lot more like one of those high-end synths than an actual string instrument. But it is an orchestra section instrument. I wanted something that would like occupy that high in the chord progression like this. Hindsight is 2020, but looking back, I feel like adding this was a little bit much. I feel like if I were to redo this, I would make those instruments more less intense. Because like right now, like they're very prominent in the mix, and I feel like they don't need to be because like this already occupies that kind of a niche. I might tweak those. And then this is a sort of ricocheting polysynth that I wanted to use that would firmly capture the intensity that I was looking for with those last chords in the chord progression. So this I really want to make sure I got right. Those quick, sharp, shocking hits. The mid is very prominent here. I wanted that to be prominent above all else for that one. Because you have all this high-end stuff, all this low-end stuff, and then I felt it would have a nice spot in the middle. And they're pretty loud, too. So I wanted them to be hearable. And then that is every instrument in this song covered. These are ES2 as well. I don't think I tweaked them incredibly. This is an orchestral instrument. I'm just going over some of the ones that I didn't go over earlier in terms of like the synths. This is a sampler, EXS24. This isn't really a synth itself. Like it is actually a really good sampler. Although Logic does have a sampler built into it, this is another sampler that you can use to do a lot of like sound font related stuff too. Actually, that I don't use too much, but I have heard is possible to do. So I don't touch around. I don't touch with this that much. I'm more interested in the effects, in terms of EXS24 instruments. This is alchemy. So now I'll just play it back from here, and we'll get into the outro. I'll cover the outro all as one thing. And that's the song. I'm very proud of this outro. I'll be frank. So you have all this build-up, all this crashing down from the chord progression, and then it ends with this washed out, spaced out, really eerie final chord from the last three instruments that you have going right here. The melody. And how extreme is the chord progression? How extreme is the pitch bend on that? I want to see. Pitch bend. That's like just barely crossing the threshold of being a new note entirely. It's like dangerously close to being, what is that, an E. So it's dangerously close to being an F there, and then down to an E flat. I love those slight moments of detuning, especially here. I think I use it to great effect here. This part of the song acts as sort of like a winding down from the intensity of the chorus, and it sort of returns to the very simple, relatively simple beginning that is present at this part of the track. It sort of returns to that kind of an intensity, especially with the drums. The drums I programmed very deliberately to return back to that original kind of progression. Whatever, I'll leave it. where you have these heavy repeating kick drums, like, and then like all these different noises from the percussion, those hits, and then it turns to the more stripped back first program percussion that I have in the song. And you have, these haven't really changed much. This is the same as it was in the beginning of the song. This is the same as it was in the beginning of the song. This is the same as it was in the beginning. This is 2. This I bring back. I have that instrument in place now, acting as a sort of added piece of ambience. It didn't really fill that spot in the song before, but I included it in for the outro. This, I actually don't know what that is. I guess it's like an added noise hit. Yeah, it is. Well, I still have that building up. Okay, I see. This is the same as it was in the beginning, but I have this added now. So it goes... How it did in the second verse. Or not, the interlude before the second verse. It's all the same as it was before. These all go away. This is the same as it was before. The hammer hitting comes back. Big saw. I don't think that was in the interludes before. It might have been, actually. No, it was not. So that's new. And then all those sounds slowly fade out. These two especially linger for a while because I wanted them to be focused on, because they were just introduced, so I wanted them to have more of a presence in the outro. This one I think I lower the volume on, but for the icy synth, I do a sweep up, remove the low end at first, and then gradually the entire synth. You see how that works right there. That's something I do a lot. It's like a simple effect, but it works very well in my experience. And then I bring these string bells back. This, I think, is where I originally put them. And at first I was just going to put them here. And then they repeat for the outro. But then I ended up putting them back here too, because I felt they worked good there as well. So that's like in the immediate outro, and then like the song winds down, all those heavy-hitting instruments fade out, and you have the basic beat. And then, to finally end the song, I wanted to do a callback to the very intro of the song, where it's like, you know, all these instruments fading in, rising in intensity, and then you have... I don't know why that's a D, it should be an E, just ignore it. But you get the idea, where you have those 4 bam, 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 and then the kick drum comes in and it goes boom, and then there's silence, and then the main track starts. I wanted the buzz to do that again, but instead of the song continuing, it ends on that. So it went... Okay, hold on. Will it work now? There we go. Okay, here. So I bring back a lot of the sounds from the intro. This is there. Those are there. But now I don't think I fade them out with the low pass. I think they stay at this intensity. Oh, they get even... Okay. I raise their high end even more. This sort of add-on to the bass comes back. This is just the bass. What I added on an extra one of the buzzes that gradually got louder in volume so that the buzzes would like rise in intensity. Not incredibly noticeable, but I think it works out all right. I bring this sound back. This is the cymbals. I keep the cymbals. That's the only part of the drum that stays. The cosmic waves come back from before. The glitching machine comes back from before. This comes back. That I continue. This creepy arpeggio comes back. one last hurrah. Everything else is almost entirely cut out, except for that. And then I have a special audio channel of the hammer that has added the echo to it. Before it was just one echo, but then I add a stereo delay to it. So that it echoes left, right, left, right, left, right, and I think the wet on that is pretty... Not the wet, the feedback. The feedback's 100% on that, so that could last for the entire rest of the song. But what I do is I cut out the volume on every track at the last possible second. Except for that kick. This last kick. So that's the last thing you hear and the song ends. Or at least that's what I would have done, but I messed up. That lingers. That sound lingers. And I didn't realize that until after I was completely done with the song. And I forgot to get rid of that. But I ended up keeping it in because I felt like it added a cool little texture to the song's last second as it faded out. Well, like you hear that little synth there, like phased up, fading away, as opposed to it just being a kick. You have that extra little sound in there. I feel like that ended up working out pretty well, as opposed to like the entire rest of the track fading out too. I really did like that idea of just silence after all was said and done, because Forge is big, he's tough, but he's also, when he doesn't want to make himself known, he has ways of like staying hidden and invisible, like he is in his introduction. So I wanted to have that kind of like a silent moment there. So I played around with that there and here too. And that is the whole song. That's every instrument in it. That's the basic structure of it, except for these two instruments right here. This is the classic electric piano is the default patch that Logic loads when you hit software instrument default patch. That's what you get. And I tend to use those instruments to like sketch out what I want the progression of the song to be. So this is, I think, the base of the chorus before I'd actually written the chorus, the melody of the chorus. So when something like... pretty much exactly what it was then. And I also knew that I wanted the last chord in the second chorus to be different, so I wrote that too. That's kind of different how it ended up actually being in the main song. That's like it's like an E minor ninth there. I don't go that far. It's just the main, the fifth. I don't go all the way up to a 9. Well, that would have been pretty cool. I kind of like that idea, actually. But that's more suited for like a jazzier piece. This isn't jazzy at all. It's aggressive horror synth. Gets your blood pumping. As a side note, originally, when I was first writing this piece, the first thing I came up with was this intro, obviously. Then after that, I knew I wanted it to get a little aggressive, and like with this part. But I didn't really know what I wanted the main progression of the song to be at first. So at first, I was going to have it be something like the It Follows title. The It Follows theme modulates between these two chords a lot. It goes C minor, not C minor, C sharp minor, then E minor. So in a similar way, I was going to make the progression of the verses be something like E, then G, then E, then maybe D, then G. So I felt like that was way too derivative, so I decided to come up with my own chord progression. And I came up with it, and I got the idea for the melody in like a spur-of-the-moment thing. I was like, wow, wait, this actually sounds really great. It like popped into my head, so I knew I had to write it down. So I actually did write it down quickly using one of these classic electric piano presets, but I guess I deleted that original instrument because that's not here. Maybe it might have been this. That's like instrument inst 22. That might have been what it was. I'm not entirely sure though. I think that is everything I have to say in terms of the production behind this song. It's a lot of what I do is like I take these presets and then edit them directly in the synth to what I want them more to sound like. I add effects to them to make them more what I want to sound like. I have been using Massive. This is like my first real foray into Massive, working on this song. And I made some of my own synths in it, and then I also took some other synths from it. And I'm going to try and learn more how to really sink my teeth into it and use it to its fullest potential, because I have not really been doing that. And I usually use a lot more samples than I did in this track. This track has like some samples, like this hammer, some like reversed instruments. But I have a lot of fun with like audio manipulation like that. That features a lot more prominently in my other work. I focused really heavily on the synths this time around. And hopefully I gave some insight into why I made certain things sound the way I did, what my thought process was behind them, and yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about this track. Let me know in the comments what track of mine you want me to do next. I'm assuming if you're checking this video out, you already know what content I have musically. If you don't, I'll put a link to my SoundCloud in the description. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this, and thanks for watching this video. And if there's a next one, I'll see you in that one.